nothing can stop me.
Chaz Kangas here for Speak Minneapolis on the most felicitous of occasions, celebrating the newly released Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. Yes, the 1991 classic has been reinterpolated and polished with a 2024 flavor. And couldn't be happier to be celebrating this with the director and the screenwriter. The great Wade Allain-Marcus and Chuck Hayward are with me today. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Sweet. So, being you're pulling on what was such a classic, the original 1971 Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, played nonstop on HBO, was a staple of every rental store, made so many of those weekends at home when you'd pop a pizza into the stove proper. Do you both remember your first time seeing the original?
I've never been asked that question before. I guess I probably should have been prepared for that. No, I don't remember never having seen it. Like, I feel like it's just always been there. It came out in 91. I was about 11 and I wasn't an athlete. So I was inside all the time and it just was on a loop on HBO, like you said. So yeah, I imagine as soon as it came out, I was on it and
Yeah.
just consuming it continuously.
I think it's important to kind of point out from the beginning that Chuck has been a adamant, deep fan of the original. And while I was aware of it and came up, it wasn't something that I came to that was like, ooh, this is one of my, deepest memories, core memories, one of my favorite movies of all time, which I think made a really wonderful pairing between the two of us to kind of come at trying to redo it for this new generation in time. So no, I couldn't tell you any time I saw it. I know that I had seen it at some point, but it wasn't something that was like stuck deeply in my memory bank.
So that in mind, then, how did you both come together into the whirlwind of this project?
It's been a long process. As you know, movie making takes a long time, but this has taken an extra long time. I was contacted by one of our producers, Oren. He brought me together with Billy Woodruff, who was the original director, but we had some scheduling conflicts. So, and then we were able to bring on Wade. And I was at the same agency as Billy, and so they kind of brought me in, met with the producers, and that was it. And I told them when I went in there, I was like, I've never prepared less for a meeting than this one, because I just know this movie backwards and forwards. Like, I know I can pretty much recite any of the dialogue. Like, I know the lyrics to the songs that play in the background. Like, this movie was just like, it's in my head and has been since childhood.
My journey was much shorter in the sense that, yeah, I guess they had lost Billy, and then the script came across my desk. They were like, hey, this is a remake of Don't Tell Mom. Are you interested? And I was like, no, not really. That doesn't seem like something that I want to do. And they're like, all right, well, just read some of it and see what happens. And so I started reading some of it, and very quickly, not only thought it was very funny and well written, but actually saw myself kind of surprisingly in the project, as far as, I'm the oldest of four siblings. And I just really connected to the way that Chuck had reinvented it to kind of center around this sibling love, which is something that we really leaned into for this iteration. And so I read it the first time and kind of surprisingly called my reps back and was like, I actually do think I want to meet on this. And, my love has only grown from there for the original and for the movie that we ended up making together.
Nice. So in this world, like, I think this really stands out as remake, reinterpolation, reimagination that captures so much of the energy of the original, but still maintains so much of being a 2024 project, being something that is so infused as something more. And I think that's, the sweet spot between the two ways that these things like usually go. So what from the original did you want to make sure that you kept on in terms of like this new one? And what was the thing that you most importantly wanted to make to modernize it?
Excuse me, the things to keep on. I was just basically like wanted to maintain the idea that like kids always want to be grown-ups and then they don't realize that being grown up sucks. And then so they have to sort of adjust and really appreciate what youth is and live it while it's there. And the one, like, I guess the thing that we wanted to change the most was like it's a Black family, so there are just certain things that are a little bit different than they would be in the original. We wanted to like give voice to that and make sure that that felt real and authentic to everybody. Obviously, there's not one type of Black family, but like it was very similar to the my family experience, and so I tried to like bring that out in the remake.
Yeah, I mean, when I read the script and then rewatched the original, I was like, oh, this story works better Black, because the truth is that, I mean, ultimately it is about, understanding the importance of youth, but like the idea, like, let's not push our kids to be adults before their time, right? Because that's essentially what happens. And that's from a generation of like latchkey kids and stuff like that. But so often we kind of, and especially in the world that we live in today, kind of push our kids to be adults, and definitely Black kids. I mean, it's ubiquitous that way. And so I think in that sense, it was very much more like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And then tonally, it's funny because I do think the 90s and now have a lot of similarities in terms of style, in terms of dress. Our wardrobe person, our costume designer, Ceci, she came up doing 90s TV shows like, Different World and Living Single and things like that. And so my mandate to all the people that got brought on to kind of create the design of this movie was really like, let's not chase anything super modern and let's not feel beholden to the past. Let's just do what feels right. And I think, with Chuck's script and all that, we were able to create something, hopefully, that felt kind of timeless and fresh, even though it felt current and today.
Definitely. And I think part of that too, and Chuck, it's with the dialogue that you have with the children. There's so many, even much more so now than in 1991, so many different subcultures of interest, and how, when you're a kid and you have the passion, you let it kind of consume and define you at those ages. And now there's so many more options for kids. And it really reflects in the very distinct personalities of their dialogue and in their interactions. And it's a really hard thing to capture, especially with how fast like youth media and youth culture works. So between like the teens and the tweens, how did you find it was your process to tune in to and just really hone in on keeping that dialogue feeling authentic?
The key for me was like, I don't want to make it, I'm 44 years old. So I was like, I don't want to make it sound like this was written by a 44-year-old. So like, I'm trying to like make like Wade said, I was trying to make it as timeless as possible. So like, there's a little bit of slang in there, but really it's just more about the emotions of that time in your life. And it's more about, like you said, identities being wrapped up in certain things of your hobbies and your interests. But also just sort of realizing that kind of you can be who you want to be, and it's not necessarily indicated by who you've been in the past. You have that freedom to sort of evolve, and so like that was kind of how I focused it, rather than like what are the kids actually say, like what are the throw Riz in there somewhere. It wasn't one of those kind of things.
Yeah, and I'm 39, so I'm much younger than Chuck.
Significant.
No, but
So
yeah. I think the other thing too is that the Chuck really delineated these different kinds of Black kids, whether it's like, oh, let's try to come across the whole gamut of where the youth are. It was like, we have so many different kinds of people inside of our culture, that exist in so many cultures, but a lot of times we can get pigeonholed as Black folks to being like a Black person or a young Black person is going to act this way. And what he really did, with this movie and reinterpreting it was being like, no, these are four very different Black kids that are kind of living in disparate worlds and have to come together in the wake of some really crazy things, And so that to me was really at the heart of what made it work and why I think young people respond to it, because it's like, yeah, I'm not like this person or like that person, but we all might hang out, because this idea of like being in a box or, you're part of some crew, I think is sort of gone now.
Yeah, and it's kind of fascinating that like you can grow up in the same home as somebody and have a completely different experience, and I think that's something that has been surprising for me to learn, and so it was something that I wanted to look at in this movie. Of like, you wouldn't think that these kids were all raised by the same people at the same time, and I just thought, I think that's fun to explore.
Yeah, and in terms of that experience of youth, of that coming of age, those child, teen, and tween years, Wade, and correct me if I'm off on this, I think one thing that your film does pacing wise really makes you feel like you were with them at their different ages. And what when I say that is because in reflecting of those years of coming of age growing up, you have those moments where it feels like so much changes so quickly in your life. And then you have those moments where you feel like the almost tension of like things are building, you're anticipating the things coming, you know there's going to be these major sort of changes that shift in your life. And I think to really convey a lot of that experience, you took a lot of choices that I think worked really well in the film. Things like the title card doesn't appear until about 15 minutes into the movie itself, which bold and well timing too when it does pop up. So I'm curious, like in terms of really creating that pacing and reflecting of the youth coming of age and the impetus that happens there. How did you approach that, or was that part of your approach in your direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you noticed that. And there are a lot of influences in this movie. I mean, a movie like Crooklyn, sort of to the family sibling element, is something that was really a touchstone for us. But also Ferris Bueller's Day Off and like kind of John Hughes movies in general to speak to that youth thing. He was such a master at being able to communicate the point of view of a film from a teenager standpoint. And part of how he would do that would be like, these teenagers are real, they're emotional, they have all these feelings. It was reflected in the camera work. And then also, any adults that were in that movie were basically wackadoos, they weren't real. And I think a lot of the time that dynamic is flipped in films. Like, kids are sort of the ones that are like so crazy and out there and misunderstood. And so for us, we really just wanted to make sure that it felt like it was youthful and buoyant and coming from that perspective, but also having this kind of gravitas and resonance that it is to be Black, to be honest, and to be stylish like that. So we wanted to really just kind of lean into that. And to BET and all our producers credit, they let us do exactly what we wanted to do. I mean, yeah, I definitely was like, are they going to let me just put a title sequence this deep into the film? And they were like, we love it. That's amazing. And to someone like Nicole Richie, who is very kind of comedic and broad in a lot of ways in this movie, but she anchors it. She's able to deliver this kind of mouthful that Chuck gave her of workplace jargon and really embody this adult and this kind of like boss, whatever, girl boss type archetype, and just kind of make it wild, which I think is how young people see adults.
And when you mentioned the producers letting you make what you wanted to make, and from the jump, the film both has there's some humor that's, while it's incredibly edgy, bleeding edge at some points, I'd even say, there's still such a genuine heart to it. It's I'd say John Waters-esque, in where it's like the shock that you feel feels like well deserved, and it's not for like shock's sake. It comes from, oh, this is a specifically crafted joke that's here to move the plot along, make us laugh, and make us enjoy it. So in working like together, like as a screenwriter and director, were there ever any moments where you tried to push yourself like further one another, where the stakes were increased for the further shock, or any moments where you had to like pull one another back to, where you thought, yeah, this might be going a little bit too far on things?
We know what he's referring to.
Really? Because I'm thinking of about four different things, but continue.
Yeah.
I can't think of any. So I mean, I loved, you mentioned it a moment ago, like the, putting the credit sequence so late. Like when I saw that the first time, I got chills. And just seeing how we were talking about the timelessness, but also the throwback of it and that sort of 70s element that is there that I didn't write. So like seeing that come to life to me was so, I don't know. It was infectious, like that spirit of like, we are doing what we want to do. And Wade took my script and did something with it that like I didn't, like he found stuff on the page that I didn't write, and I'm so grateful.
I think he's probably talking a little bit about like the use of the N-word, or maybe like some of the sexual innuendos, some of the, marijuana stuff, things that don't feel, because the truth is like, we live in a pretty kind of fractured world, as we very much know. And I think even when it comes to these kind of films, it's like, it either has to be like squeaky clean, or it's like absurdly grotesque. And the truth is that's not where most of us exist. That's not where most of our comedy sits. you know, and I do think that that's true visually, right? A lot of times these big broad comedies, and we wanted to present like a big studio film, but also have these kind of underlying real edge and things that we grew up with, right? So that's like not looking like an overly lit sitcom that some of these movies look like, and having a little bit more of like a, you know, just like a kind of reality, and I guess the word is grit to it. But when it comes to the story, Chuck, I think you should talk a little bit about how you were able to balance the kind of social aspect without drowning in it, and the comedic aspect without kind of grossing out an audience.
I I think the goal was sort of just like make it feel real, like make it similar to what my experiences are. And like Wade said, it's never it's sometimes it's gross, sometimes it's really intellectual, sometimes it's really sweet. Like that's you. There's all sorts of emotions that live in one person. So I was just trying to make that super clear. And like in terms of comedy, like the jokes were always supposed to be about for character driven, like they're not going to make it. To me, it's wasteful to make a joke about just something to be funny. It was like, this is the funny way that this character is relaying this thing, or this is the funny way that this character is making fun of that character, or this is the funny way that this character is expressing something that they might not be able to do without a joke. Like maybe it's a little too personal to do seriously, so a joke is what will bring it out. So I hope I answered your question there.
Oh yeah, and I think it's important. I think it's important to talk about our R rating, because, you know, we got an R rating. That was quite a surprise to us, to be honest. You know, I mean, that was not something that we wanted to get. That's not something that we expected to get. And we felt a certain type of way about it. You know, we were sort of like, why are we getting this? Why can we not sort of show kids being kids, but like you can show really crazy violence in movies and they'll allow a PG-13? That's fine. That's okay. You know, and like, you know, so yeah, there were some discussions about some of the language and some of the behavior, but ultimately all the partners agreed that this was the best version of the movie. And you know, we're grateful that everyone stuck to the vision that me and Chuck had.
Awesome. So two more questions. One thing that really stood out about the film, and it isn't like a major part of the film, but the touching on it is something that you really don't see, is really on screen. There's an acknowledgement that the pandemic happened. There's a moment, you know, in the Uber where she mentions like not seeing the face because he has like the COVID mask on and that. And it really seems, and this is also just sort of like how like media and art was created after the Spanish flu pandemic 100 years ago, that once we collectively move past something, you know, together we experience, typically in a lot of American art, no one wants to even touch or even like mention anything in that regard at all. So even just being like, you know, like the handful of like throwaway that were mentions in there, was there any discussion about the importance of keeping that in, or was there any efforts to maybe consider leaving that out, or was it just something that just because the line worked out, it just wound up being written in the stars?
I think I might have had a few more references in there that the producers requested we remove, and I'm glad they did request that, because like I don't think you should go through something that traumatic and never mention it in your art. I think that's ridiculous. So it was like, you can mention it, but like mention the things that came out of it, not necessarily the toughness of it. So like the being able to look back at it and laugh, I think was something that was important for me to put out there, because I still to this day will like sometimes go to the supermarket or like a you know, football game and be like, I can't believe we're here in public around these people. Like this felt like this would never happen again. So like it's more about appreciating the community that we have now after being removed from it for so long. So like that was just it feels like a throwaway line, but it really is meant to embody like the just appreciating being together again.
Yeah, I mean, for me, from a visual standpoint, that first meeting between Brian and Tanya is just all about the eyes. And so that moment where he can kind of cover up his face and it's just eyes in the rear views that they're having was exactly how I wanted that to look. So for me, it was like fantastic.
Excellent. So finally, and I'm not going to get into spoiler territory, the very last lines in the very last scene of the film, fantastic. At what? So when writing the script and during like the whole production, did you know the whole time that that is the exact way you wanted to end it?
No, I think that kind of came. Normally, when I'm writing, like the 20th draft or whatever, sometimes something will occur to me, and I'll be like, oh, I should put that in there, and then I'm like, that's a little too far. I shouldn't do that. And then I'm like, if I say that, I should do it. So it's like, if it scares me, if it feels a little bit weird, let's do it. But it also is sort of the theme of the movie. Like, it's also kind of why we redid it and why we made it black, and what the soul of it and the essence of the messages of the movie. So it felt like not having it there would have been a glaring omission.
Yeah, and that's also, you know, one of the many reasons we cast Miss Pat, because to have someone as sort of comedically brilliant and have that kind of roll off the tongue the way she does, you know, that's just exactly what we wanted. And also as a final image, to sort of have this Norman Rockwell type image of the family together like that. You know, that again was the whole point of making this movie, right? Is to just make a movie about a family that is Black, and seeing them on screen together was a powerful moment for us to be able to create and then to put out into the world.
Well, it's powerful to see, and it's a great ending to a great film. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for bringing this remake of Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead into our lives, into our eyes, ears, and hearts. Congratulations on it. I am Chaz Kangas for Speak Minneapolis, inviting you to watch it all, available on anywhere films can be streamed and on demanded right now.
Nothing can stop me.